Right, it's going to be the second episode of Shut Up and Scale. And despite the fact that I haven't said before, the first part of the title is like ironic because obviously we never will shut up. I've even actually technically damaged my voice with a mixture of going to America, doing like a core stream for like 5 hours, long haul flights, maybe even got a cold. But don't worry, I will just, instead of going, oh good, he's going to take it, no, I'm just going to power through it. Don't worry about it. I'll just have an even, I was going to say really, an even more obnoxious and annoying voice while making the same potentially shit points. So obviously we've got our usual panel of three people. It's going to be the same people on every episode. We've got Nymaera here, who does the LPL and all the other things he does. Also comes on some of our shows. You sometimes will see him as a guest on Power Spike. We've got Mary Tyler Moore, Peter Dunn, who actually used to listen. It's still about that little bob haircut type thing you've got going on, bro. It's wild, okay? Listen, it's working for you in your own way. I'll give you that. I will say that's one area I actually do feel sorry for women, boys, because women will go and spend lots of money at the salon because they want to feel like a new them, and give themselves. And then famously, we never notice, but bizarrely, just when Peter changes his hair, I remember you're like, "What's going on there, Peter? Wait, what's the reason for that?" Like, it's actually the effect they want to have, but you're getting it for some reason. Who knows why? At least I noticed, though. At least I did notice, Peter.
Mate, when I went to uni, I went like full on blonde. I went for like way the other way. I was like, I've got to make something so visible, it's got to change it. Okay. Sadly, I came out looking like Viserys Targaryen, not the look I was going for, but it was a very big change.
Sure, man. No, I mean, this is just my stay-at-home parent haircut, so, it's functional, let's put it that way. Exactly.
Well, and also the other reason why you shouldn't have wanted to look like Viserys Targaryen is it doesn't matter how much people liked you or thought you were interesting, you got killed off way too early. But enough about your league career.
Oh, shit.
Listen,
why did you have to lead off with a headshot?
Boys, it's all listen, much like that actual upset attempted ult from Caitlyn in game 2 against Vitality, it didn't kill you at the end though. It almost did. It was like the bullet time came in, but you got away under the tower. It's all right. There's still a chance to live to fight another day. That's also my style, the shot across.
Okay, and now I'm awake. All right, let's get into it.
Well, speaking of which though, obviously on this show, as we pointed out on the last one, in theory we bring our own topics, but we're also aware of what feedback is. We quickly learned 3 topics just from us. That's a show already. In fact, you're going to usually have to cut one down. So we want to have fan topics. So we decided instead we're going to tweak it a bit, which is each week, whoever thinks they have the least important topic, we'll just take that out and we'll put in a fan topic. Because obviously, if you're a fan, subscribe to Last Discord. There's a channel in there, Shut Up and Scale. You can submit your topic for the show. So we're actually going to do one of those, and we're actually going to start with it. It's one that we were going to try and do last episode, but because people ask open-ended questions like, review the entire careers of Blabber and Razor. Yeah, that's a show in itself, isn't it? It's not a 4-hour show, this one, boys, hopefully. So there was a question that was actually a banger, because I think it's a good example of the sorts of things you can ask us, which is it doesn't have to be something totally topical to right now. So a good fan question, especially because how long have leagues been around, is they basically just said, what were the most entertaining seasons of League of Legends to watch? Because think about it, we're in technically, season 16 now or something? So it's been a million years. So obviously, we've got a lot of collective experience of watching League in many different regions, different metas, all that jazz. So who wants to start out on this one? In this one, in theory, we're going wherever because it's subjective, isn't it? So who has an example of where we would start? What's an example of an entertaining season for you in League?
I think a really good one to start with, because I think there are so many ways to think about this, because you have to think about the big events, but you also have to think about regionally too. So there are some where like Worlds was really good, but the rest of the season was kind of mid. And I didn't, and those ones I think I have to drop lower down. One which I thought had incredible regionals and also decent internationals was 2015. I thought 2015 had some of the most entertaining regional storylines we've ever had. It had SKT versus what were going to be Rocks. At that time, it was Huya and the GE Tigers. Fantastic storylines for Korea. Also, KT Rolster were very notable at that point. You still had Mad Life around. And despite the Korean exodus, there were enough storylines there. Speaking of the Korean exodus, I thought that China became very, very interesting in that period of time too, because you had players like Marta move over there and start a new part, Deft as well. So that really had a new breath of life. And while I think you could argue that 2014 was better in Korea, you can definitely argue that. I think that the West was at its most entertaining point in 2015 as well. You had CLG versus TSM and Cloud9 still in the picture in 2015. Incredible teams and some very close series. And then you also had Fnatic have one of its greatest rivals in Origin. And I think that, you look at Fnatic Origin and also stuff like Unicorns of Love in the early 2015. I look everywhere across the world and there was a great rivalry. I think it was the hype of esports globally for League of Legends at that point too. And then, I think that the MSI finals and, well, Worlds was a little bit more sleeper, but it was so kind of cool to watch Faker just kind of dominate the entire world that actually had its own entertainment part to it. But I thought that across the average of the season, you are most likely to find interesting storylines and gameplay in 2015.
Interesting. Yeah, no, I mean that's kind of in my so I kind of approach this. So I came to a similar conclusion to you, but my approach was different. So I went and looked at the seasons of League of Legends, and I basically said which ones are not the best.
Okay.
Okay. And
yeah, I had to do that too.
The conclusion that basically I drew is that the years where Riot messed up bot lane balance were the worst years. And why does bot lane balance...
Okay, so which years are those, just so we're on the same page?
Well, I'll go and talk over that quickly. But why does bot lane balance matter so much? Like, there's been so many OP mid laners, so many OP top laners. Why is it bot lane specifically that matters? It's because normally AD carries aren't banned that often at international tournaments, right? And whenever you go into an international tournament and you have an AD carry that has a 68% win rate or like a 70% win rate or like, or something like this, it ruins your entire balance. And sure, you can put bans into AD carry, but at the point where you're locked into bans for AD carry, you're then because before Fearless, your drafts become very, very similar. Because there's very, very little, like, let's say you're forced to ban Yuumi or you're forced to ban Aphelios every single game, right? That means that then the OPs in every other position are kind of locked in, and there's less interest, less kind of different sophistication in strategy, right? Because AD carries generally do the same thing, just some of them do a slightly different thing in a slightly better way, right? But the strategic diversity on bot lane and on AD carries and things like this, you just have different levels of engaged champions, different levels of enchanters, different levels of stat sticks, right? That scale at different points, right? But they all essentially do very similar things, right? But when you have those bans don't need to be put into bot lane and they can be put into elsewhere. That's where you get the interesting diversity in comps. Okay, so where bot lane, when has Riot messed up bot lane balance? Okay, so I give two examples of this. Okay, two main periods. Okay, so first period of time, 2017 to 2018. Why is 2017 to 2018 bad? It's because 2017 they introduced Ardent Sensor between playoffs and Worlds. Or sometimes, my team was in fucking playoffs on the patch they introduced it, and I'm not bitter about that at all. But basically, they introduced Ardent Sensor. Then Ardent Sensor was there for like 6 months, and then it was gone. And then then the meta went from being AD carry plus Enchanter into like wild, Heimerdinger, Syndra, Lux, you can play all kinds of crazy things, right?
It was the awesome dudes meta, the Darius bot lane from Faker, yeah.
True. Okay, so 2017 to 2018 was like bot lane, they just fucked up the entire balance. Then the second period of time when they fucked up the entire balance was kind of like this period from 2020 to 2022, right? 2020 is when kind of Aphelios was introduced into the game, and Aphelios could do everything, right? And when it was a strong champion, it basically warped bot lane in a very, very unhealthy way. And then 2022 is of course Yuumi, when Yuumi was kind of at its most powerful. So therefore, basically I would put like the weaker periods being like 2017 to 2018, 2017 like Worlds to 2018, and then 2020 to 2022, right? So those periods ruled out. Second part of this is. So, by the way, one
thing to add on to that as well. The reason why Peter's not just making it 2017 is because infamously, everyone only remembers in 2018 what happened at Worlds with the solo lanes and IG. But obviously, famously, part of the reason why RNG were the kings before that is it was still a bot lane game right up until Worlds even. So, yeah, you're right. Just to add on that, I do think people misremember 2018 as an awesome year, whereas for me, it was only Worlds was the sexy one. The rest was actually very by the numbers,
I quite liked MSI 2018 because that was the end of Korean era of dominance. And you had like RNG fell Kingzone, so that was Uzi got his international title. So I think there's a shout out. There's a shout out for particularly China was great to watch in 2018 because we had IG RNG. That was fucking great, and we also had like the start of Griffin with Viper and some really cool players kind of come up through that year. Because it was 2018 summer, right, which Griffin came up, right? I think then they sadly couldn't make Worlds because they weren't competing in spring. Sure. But we did have some of that. But yeah.
But was that better than 2018? Like 2018 feels like. No, 2019. Yeah.
Oh no! I'm not saying it's better than 2019. I'm just saying like there's some caveats for that.
Oh, sure, fair.
Yeah, so like 2018, I think on the whole was a pretty hard watch for a lot of people because and also like the AD carry meta was the Kai'Sa Xayah meta, right? 2018, and that kind of lasted. That lasted for like a year or two, really, where everyone had to play the Kai'Sa Xayah. And while they're very interactive champions, look, I love Kai'Sa Xayah. I think they're very cool champions. But when you, much like the Jinx Aphelios of 2022, which funnily enough, I'm actually planning to make a video at some point about the best AD carries of all time in LoL esports. And 2022 is such a funny one because you have like Aphelios get released and immediately have 1,500 games in pro in 2022. Yeah. Like most of the time you have something like, maybe like 1,000 or whatever, like tops. And that's like a crazy year for them. Like something like Lucian did that across mid lane and bot lane when he was around. But you had like Jinx and Aphelios have like 1,500 games each because no one's playing anything else because they just ruled the meta at that point. It really warped things.
Yeah. But I mean, basically, so basically, I think that there's kind of 4 periods that I kind of acknowledge, right? The first is, if you talk about the pre...
You did technically go with, like, there was 2 things. There was, like, 3. There's 10. There's as many as I can get out. Keep going.
I'll be fast. Okay, so first you have Season 2, right? So Season 2 is when you have, like, all of these mega creative things. So I'll put some of these VODs basically in the comments, like, last week. But, that you had, like, NLB being at its most creative. You had, like, the Chinese State Championships, like, all of these feeder tournaments, super, super interesting feeder tournaments, and an open circuit, right? So this is before you had LCS. This is before you had
everything LPL. You had nothing back then.
Yeah. It was so each tournament was isolated. It was exciting. You never knew if people were innovating all the time. And obviously this goes all the way. It goes kind of. I'd say this period kind of goes from WCG 2011. Look at that tournament if you haven't seen it. Like, go and Gamepedia, like, look at some of the people that were playing in that tournament and what became of their careers. So I go from WCG 2011 to, let's say, IPL 5. Okay, I would say is Season 1, and maybe you can put that rolls into, like, Season 3 Worlds, right? Like, you put that in entire, like, point 1. 2014... less interesting for various reasons, but I'm not going to keep going on that. Then the thing Nymaera was talking about, like kind of 2015, 2016, kind of the golden age. This is when like franchising had properly was kind of building the stories. You had all of these really intense regional rivalries. You mentioned 2015. I would go all the way to 2016 Worlds because that was when you had the Rox versus SKT, the famous.
Okay. Whoa. I got to step in on this though, because yes, I think Rox SKT is still to date the best series ever played. 2016 was a dog shit meta. It was so slow, it was so boring, and almost every other team besides SKT and Rox was awful to watch. You watch any of the Samsung games, they just stall out until 50 minutes and then they just try and late game team fight. That was an awful meta to watch besides those series.
But it is sweet, even though that final was 5-game series, there's a reason no one ever brings it up. It's not a great series to watch.
Terrible. That is like one of the worst 5-game series. It's one of actually weirdly the most dominant 5-game series I've ever seen, because Samsung, when they actually won their games, they weren't actually like quote better. They just it's like
I think there was like a 70-minute game in one of those, bro. It was like a crazy long one.
It was absolutely insane. And despite Crown was really good in that series. He was a great mid laner. But realistically, 2016, I mean, MSI was quite fun because CLG made finals, and we had like the very start of Lucian mid. Yeah, we had like Lucian mid come out from MSI 2016 from Xiaohu. Most of 2016, like it was a really bad meta. I mean, some of the rivalries lasted. I mean, 2016. That was the Jensen Zonya's moment, right? With Echo? That was that.
I think so. Yes.
So I mean, there were some legendary moments. There were in 2016. You still have that hype of the golden age of League, but the meta was starting to slip. I mean, Assassins were starting to fall out of the meta. We had, remember 2016 was the Iceborne Sunfire top meta with like Trundle Echo, Poppy. That was awful.
But I push back on this a little bit because I think that whilst that was the meta, like I think 2016 MSI in particular was was a really good one. It was when Kai'Sa was kind of like Kai'Sa Flash Wolves were like at their best. Okay, sure, they lost to CLG in that semi-final. I don't know what the fuck happened in that. I didn't expect them to lose to CLG. But you want to see Kai'Sa at his best. You want to look at like 2016, 2017 MSI, right? Because the thing was that the meta did slow down and go into like these very uninteresting ways. But I think what happened is Flash Wolves were playing like this really intense, super aggressive. Like Flash Wolves with Maple and Casa and Sword Art, they would always go hard at you at the start, and the rest of the world would never be prepared for it at MSI, and they would always hit, like the Korean teams especially, really hard at MSI, and then the teams would learn and adapt to how to neutralize this going into the later part of the year. So I'm like, when I'm judging a lot of these years, I kind of like the early part of the year, because for me, that's when a lot of the innovation happens, and then
that's also notice. By the way, one thing that essentially we're also learning as we have this discussion is actually what Nymaera brought up before we started the show, which is that question isn't just broad in the sense of which years. It really means things like, do you mean the meta of the game? Do you mean specific storylines? Because, for example, what Peter's talking about there, I can put it this way: I also wouldn't have picked 2016 as like one of the best for the narratives of the game. But Peter's doing like a coaches thing. Like the real reason why Team Flash Wolves is amazing is because notice the people they counted was Koreans who had the most structured gameplay ever. In fact, there's a famous story that Perks will even tell you that essentially, supposedly in early 2017, when there was that IEM where Flash Wolves beat G2, supposedly Mithy and Perks just went to the Flash Wolves and like, what are you guys doing in the game? And what they learned there was what actually gave them like the knowledge to later make G2 a top international. So like, but that's so like nerdy coach angle, isn't it? So Peter's got his own perspective on this, obviously.
Yeah. But obviously, it's also lane swap as well. 2016 is height of the lane swaps, you know?
Yeah.
2014 was pretty big on that too, right? But 2016 was hard a lane swap, and I think for a lot of people that'd be a huge negative, because lane swap is not about, because a lot of people would say, damn, I want to see people actually laning, and that was a huge issue right up until 2018 when we saw that come back. So it's like, well, what the hell? We don't get to see like Forgiven lane against Reckless back in that era. That was one of the big complaints.
And
like,
you had that stupid thing where it just meant every top laner's like a million miles behind, but you can't tell like, is he playing bad?
Like Maokai.
Yeah, everyone's behind levels, so it was hard to evaluate. I know what you mean.
Yeah. Whereas you compare that to 2015, and you had like Riven Fiora meta top lane, and then I mean, like you go a couple of years further forward, and then you kind of get stuck in Camille hell, where Camille was really fun, but everything else was just getting so shit on by her that it was just like really bad for everyone else. So like that definitely came into it. Lane swaps are a very controversial topic, because I think during points in say like 2014, one of my favorite seasons, 2014, that made it more interesting because it was like the start of lane swaps before everyone had like completely solved it. So you had some real big drama around how people innovated at that point. You go forwards a couple of seasons, everyone's doing the same thing for the first couple of minutes, and that's only slightly better than say like funnel meta, where it was fun for the first 2 games you watched, and then you think, I don't want to see Xayah Braum from G2.
Here's what we're also learning is that this isn't one where we're all collectively deciding the best ones. Like, I think we're all going to disagree. Like, example is, I agree with you, Peter. He's going, 2014 was good. He just thinks it was interesting. Those were trash. 2014 was where there was one period in time where literally there was a meta called 2v0, where you just went and knocked the towers down. They had to quickly change that. The same year was the year where they had Feral Flare, where the jungler never interacts with the game. He just farms. You might think that's interesting. That is ass to watch, bro. Like, remember, we've got the entire history.
The start of Zillion.
There's another thing. Who the fuck wants to watch a game where a powerful Soraka or Zillion is in the game? That's the opposite of fun.
That's actually
You're bringing shit back to life. You're healing people. No, I want people to die in 100-0, bro. Exactly.
I raise you Emperor Palpatine.
Okay.
Static Shiv Alistair top, where he'd headbutt you away, auto attack, and it'd look like Force Lightning. Most broken champion at Worlds ever, like 100% ban rate at Worlds. God, I fucking missed 2014. We still had Zed Talon. We hadn't like killed off assassins in the name of like, oh, people don't like playing against assassins yet. We still had fun champions. You're absolutely right. There was a lot of broken shit, but I have a lot of nostalgia for 2014.
But it's funny because you mentioned the Alistair, but then what happened next year? It was GP Mordekaiser next year, wasn't it?
Oh, Jesus Christ. Yeah, the Juggernaut patch. Oh, God. Yeah, actually, no, you bring that up. That actually kind of ruined Worlds. That knocks
No, look, it did, unfortunately. Because remember, essentially, it took... Remember, this is back when there was only 3 bans. And back then, you on one side, you had to ban 2 champions immediately. It was ridiculous, wasn't it?
Unless you were LGD and Imp was like, yeah, I can play into this. Turns out, nope, you couldn't.
No, they couldn't.
No one could.
Okay, we're really getting stuck in the weeds here because every season is such a big conversation.
But this is where but this is what I'm leading up into, which is my controversial take, which is I think the best year for watching Worlds, watching League of Legends, is 2025. And the reason I'm going to say it's 2025, maybe 2026.
God, no.
The reason I'm going to say this is if you go back every single year, with the exception of maybe 2015, maybe 2019. Okay, and then 2012, 2011. But are we going to count season 1, season 2? Has been ruined by an attempt to overcompensate balance something within the game.
Okay.
And
but they did that in 2025 with lane swaps. They tried to kill it before Worlds.
But what I'm going to say is, I think that the advent of Fearless, or the introduction of Fearless, doesn't make the game more skill intensive, right? Because you've lost out now on this ability to have these superpower OP, one tricks, like the binge jacks or something like this that you always have to worry about. It takes away a little bit of the identity of the teams. But what it does do is it stabilizes the balance of the game. And that to me makes the game more interesting, right? And the reason why is, if something is mega OP right now, in a best of 5, you can just trade it off early in the series, or you can just have it. If there was GP Mordekaiser right now, you could just trade GP Mordekaiser, and you don't have to worry about it for the rest of the series. And to me, that makes it more interesting because I don't have to worry that the next patch is going to fuck something up, and that allows me to enjoy the game more, and that's what makes it really, really interesting to me. The past 2 years, right? And I think the only time we've had kind of something like this happen is in 2012, 2013, where everything was OP and nothing was really balanced and nothing was kind of enforced. And that's why I'm going to say. I think 2015, there's an argument for it. 2019, there's an argument for it. I'm going to say 2025.
So what we're learning is people watching different ways here, boys, because some people, I'm watching as a fan, Nymaera's watching as a caster, and Peter's watching as a coach, so I can see how we all have our own biases and protocols we're looking for here.
What do you think, Thorin? We've been talking, but what do you think?
I mean, what's funny is I won't retread the same area. I was actually going to say, if no one picked it, 2012, because I think actually there's that almost hits the whole gamut. As you said, first of all, at the open circuits, you had things like regions interacting in a way you'd never seen before. Remember the infamous one when players went to that MLG, and at the time North Americans had never played them, and then just smashed everyone. Everyone's like, wait a minute, but they're the second best even in Korea. That was blowing people. That was when we sort of learned Koreans are OP. Obviously, you had back then, because you'd only just invented things like bot lane B and ADC and support, you had insane champion diversity because there just wasn't the same structure. Famously, when people revolutionized the game, usually it would be by champion selection. People know, a lot of modern fans will have known Diamond Prox did amazing things. No, he played champions that weren't even jungle champions. Shyvana wasn't a fucking jungle champion, bro. That was some top lane shit. Or he would play
Lee Sin.
Yeah, Lee Sin also wasn't, even though now it's the most iconic one. Back then, you'd play crap like Maokai or something like that, bro. That's why the revolution wasn't just what he did. It's even his vision on the meta was so different. And then also the other one I'd throw in on that one is a lot of funny enough, a lot of what Peter's referring to, a lot of things that Riot did specifically because they didn't like how people played League hadn't been done yet. So the reason why no one will probably ever beat how insane that CLG Moscow 5 scaling game is because that was back when you could literally just sit and scale forever. You could sit in your base and farm the waves and wait for the right fight. In the modern day, Riot invented things like Baron buffs and dragons, etc. That meant you can't do that. Eventually, there are win tools on the map that you must all go to, otherwise the opponent wins the game. They did that to stop things like that. So back then, you could also just do a lot of really insane things because it was kind of just a wide open sandbox. So
and Nivea Karthus
it's a very fun year. I mean, by the way, put it this way, that was the reason why I fell in love with Froggen's play. If you came along in season 7, you're going to go, this is boring, he's just playing Orianna. He was playing Lee Sin mid, Kog'Maw mid. He played everything, boys. Back then, you could just pick whatever you were good at. There wasn't even the same pro meta of you must play these 3 things. There was no websites to look up you're an idiot. There was no LS to tell you these are the S. You just played whatever you were good at in your role.
Yep. No, I agree. And I think people forget, I think that this was one year as well that all the regions were had an amount of balance, right? And the story that I always tell from this, going back to WCG 2011, is why is the Odd One considered one of the best Western junglers in the world in China? It's because of what happened in 2011 WCG. Right. It's when he was playing for Canada. What was the team? I think it was CLG. It was a CLG.
Yes, it was. It was CLG.
Yeah, it was yeah, he was playing for CLG. So not even for TSM. He was playing for CLG. And there was a series that they played in the quarterfinals against Invictus Gaming, which is Invictus Gaming, people in China thought they're just going to stomp this entire tournament, right? They're going to demolish everybody, and They played into Odd One, and he had like one of the most insane Trundle games. Like, the VOD isn't even up anymore in any English website I can find. To go back to go and check on this, I had to go on Bilibili and like look up all the VODs of like 2010 in Chinese, you know, with all the Chinese ads and things like this. And that is, you know, it was a time where you could be Diamond Prox and innovating. You could be the odd one and innovating. Because Trundle wasn't that common a pick. You could be like you could be World Elite with Wei Zhao and things like this. You could scale like Frog and
I'll give you an example. If people don't know the famous thing WE did, this is another example of the game. This can't exist now. Since in their team they had not only Wei Zhao was their best player, he was the best ADC in the world. They would do alien shit like not take towers to make a lane phase last forever, so he has max items in the team. That's genius. Like there's an element of that. Like no one else was even thinking of the game that way, but there was also no tool to stop that.
Yeah,
I think there's like one other shout out like I'd give here though, because like a lot of the seasons that we're talking about are obviously a long time ago. So if you've started watching in like the last year or two, watching a game like that, you're effectively watching a different game. The graphics were ass.
Sure.
It was a very slow game. In fact, actually, looking at it as a caster, in some ways, the casting back in 2013, like the start of the OGN broadcast, 2013, fucking incredible. Watching the rise of Faker. Of course, you had players like Pawn and Dade, or Dade really come up to the play as well. Had like stuff like SKT versus KT Rolster Summer Finals. Fantastic. There was some great series across there. But like it was such a slow game on the whole that casting had to kind of like deal with the fact that you had so much downtime, which meant you had some of the greatest casting moments there. Just talking just mad shit throughout most of the game. So if that's not your thing and you really want to have something closer to modern day experience, Worlds 2022, despite the asterisks about a load of teams having COVID, fantastic entertainment. You know, Deft's run against Faker, that was incredible. But I think as an overall season, 2023 was pretty
That was actually
good.
my other pick, by the way, because remember, I always think this detail. The reason why I'm biased, even though they didn't win Worlds, I still think the JDG roster is the best team ever. It's because I always told people, if you want to do a real best team ever, what you really need to be able to do is they have to all meet in some alternate dimension and play at their peak level. And the reason I always say I thought that JDG team was the best team ever is they're probably the best team fighting and late game team ever to play League. And that's the only one quality that almost fits every season of League, and again famously every game of Team League of Legends pretty much ends in a team fight. So that the fact that they were the best that year, and also let's add in a couple of other details. Actually, every region had a good team. Gen G rose up in Korea. You had fucking G2 was mega. That's the first one with the eye crossed. Even Team Liquid from NA actually that was the one year they were good and could play like proper macro. Low key, bear in mind, I've noticed a comparison I did as well, by the way. 2023 and 2012, I've picked ones where it's also not like it's just a one region fucking year. Like there's something relative that can give you some degree of parity, because also that's something that is important. Whereas the more extreme seasons, notice a lot of the ones we missed out are the ones where one team just shit on everyone and everyone was just playing catch up for second place, weren't they?
Yep. I mean, I put the 2023 one I think is interesting because yes, JDG were the best team in the year, but we got T1 versus JDG at Worlds, right? Because there have been years
big
where,
too. Yes.
Yeah. There have been years where the best team is in comes to Worlds, and then they don't even play the Worlds winners.
Yeah.
You know, like
or they go out too early, like 2018.
I mean, Gen G's done it a bunch of times as well. Yeah.
Like the year the 2018. When you say 2018, you mean
RNG,
G2, right?
Yep.
Yeah, but we never got to see because G2.
Which, by the way, as if you wanted to be even more blue balls. Oh, don't worry, all the people on the other side of the bracket, like Fnatic and fucking Youngbuck and stuff, they all say like, oh yeah, by the way, we were actually really scared because we thought if that team like won that bracket, they just win the tournament automatically, and then they just lost to fucking Wadid and Okyan, and I was like, what? That's like some pop out of a time machine DeLorean and change that shit immediately.
But I think that's a really good argument for like 2023 and 2024, because 2023 we got T1 versus JDG. 2024 we got the world final T1 versus BLG. Which
but then I have to rewatch like Faker Flash Galio doubling my career out of existence and the LPL broadcast getting shut down.
Between and then Carrier stopping that like teleport or whatever on the base. Oh no, it's just depressing. Again, that's like another
2024.
thing.
It's a great season, but personally for me, I'm like, I can just see the LPL broadcast crumbling as T1 make these clutch plays. I'm like, oh my fucking god, like we've lost the broadcast.
Yes. Anyway, also you can technically infer by all the years we didn't say what years just definitely sucked, because there was 3 or 4 that not very memorable. Right. Anyway, should we go on to the next question?
Yep. Sounds good. I think we've nattered a lot about
that.
Right,
the next question though is also tangential because this is more of a historical one. Go on, Peter.
But sorry, just to wrap up this, I think people should put in the comments what they think.
Yeah, of course.
Because I'd be curious to see what our viewers
Yeah, and I would just say I would preempt your question by just add like, what was your lens basically? Like, were you going on meta? Did you like to play the game? Was it that you watched a certain region, or was it like a specific thing about like the narrative of the
it's just like
side?
your favorite player or team.
Yeah.
Well, that's it. Like,
that's a totally valid one. Yeah.
Like I have a soft spot for 2021 because Detonation focused me and made Worlds groups the first time of an LGL team. Like that's special to me. Was it a good year overall? Well, it's COVID kind of ridden, right? So it's like a harder year. But I've got like special memories of 21.
Sure.
Okay, so anyway, the next question is going to be mine, which is this. Because I actually think in esports history, the hardest thing ever to evaluate is either players who have a very idiosyncratic approach to their role. They don't just do the traditional things that you're good at. And the other one is people who've won a lot but aren't considered the best. Well, here's what's mad. This player has a perfect overlap with both. Because the question is, how do you properly evaluate the career of Gumayusi in the context of the best ADCs ever? Because there's a few things. One, the only time I've ever heard anyone say this guy could be the best ADC is once he'd won all the Worlds. Because at that point in time, Worlds especially was obviously his ultimate domain, wasn't it? I noticed if you ever went to the regular seasons, I don't think there's ever a season where anyone even said he was the best. In fact, most of the time, even another Korean would be considered better. It could be a Ruler, Viper, whoever it might be in which era. And then secondly, obviously, when he played ADC, this is why it's so fascinating to see him now in Hanwha Life, isn't it? He obviously played with not only Keria, who warps your perception of what that bot lane's going to be, because Keria might be the best support and the most unique support ever, but also Gumayusi had all those weird elements in his game where, like, I actually thought when he first came into the league, they were doing some, like, Peter Dunn with Danny shit, like, oh, they intentionally limiting his game. No, they never saw him seemingly as some, like, power laner. He never played certain remember, when Zeri was OP, this guy never went fucking near it. Like, there's certain champions this guy actually would be shielded from, and so I've always wanted to know what other people's perspective are, because I feel like some fans think he's the GOAT, he's got the resume. Some people, I don't know, some people probably think he sucks, I don't know. So where is everyone at on this? How do you evaluate his career?
It's really complicated because Gumayusi has one of the most varied careers of any player I've ever seen in terms of, like, he's had highs, he's had lows, he's been weak side, he's been strong side. He went from being like the choker to the hero. You know, if you look through like his whole career, obviously 2020 he came in for like one series, you can't really evaluate that. 2021, you know, he was trading off with Teddy, but he was the one playing when they lost to like Ghost and Beryl in World Semifinals, where Ghost and Beryl kind of like beat them with creativity. Stuff like the Jhin Maokai ended up being huge for them, where they'd soak XP off the Maokai supports, getting level 6 for the Herald fight. That was when T1 would always rush Herald at 8 minutes or whatever it was. I'm trying to remember the meta back then. And, you know, back at that point, you had players like Viper who were really popping off. Ruler was still around. You had, you know, Deft still in the conversation thereabouts too. So this was before he kind of earned his reputation. And I think 2022 is where he started to do that. Because, you know, we're talking about regular seasons, you know, when was he viewed as the best regionally? I think 2022 spring was the time you could say that, really. When they went, that was their 18-0 split. And that was when they played, like, a ton of hyper carries for him. I guess you could have argued, like, 2023 spring when they played the double range bot lane too. But you had like those 2 springs in a row where we thought, okay, oh my god, this bot lane is insane. They're going to destroy everything. But then the reason why we don't view them in the same way is because then, well, finals went wrong for them. And then MSI went wrong for them too, because that was the era when he was choking in finals, or not him choking in finals, but like Zeus particularly really struggled in finals because they had this long streak of LCK, like summer 22, yeah, because they actually did well in spring. They destroyed spring 22, and then MSI went wrong for them versus RNG, although that was the time when it was like off location and RNG couldn't make it.
But it's like they lost 3 finals in a row. They lost MSI, LCK, and then the final of Worlds, yeah.
Well, I think it was even 4, right? Because they lost LCK, they summer 22, Worlds 22, spring 23, and then summer 23. I think they lost like, or maybe one of them wasn't a finals, but like it was a huge streak. And then obviously the Worlds came in after that point where like once he won so many Worlds, you're like, well, surely we've got to respect him on the same level these other names. So there are so many ups and downs. And I think the thing which really boils my noodle when it comes to talk about this is that because so much of his success, it doesn't all come within a calendar year, a season, which we like to think about League of Legends. You can't just say Guma was the best AD carry of this year. Pretty much every year of his career he's had an insane Worlds, but something else has kept him from going to the top rung of it. Because he had like Viper, Deft Ruler, even Pays right at points in 2024 was insane too. It's really hard to like condense it down into that, which makes it very, very hard to kind of like say this extended period of time who's definitely the best, which is often what we use to evaluate other laners.
I mean, for me, I don't think he's okay. So with the exception of maybe, I mean, he did win the MVP in Worlds Finals last year, right?
Yep.
Yeah,
he did, but I think there are caveats to that myself.
I think
not that he wasn't great at Worlds, but there's caveats.
Sure. But I mean, what I would say, look, if we're trying to evaluate somebody to be in conversation for best in their role, right? You normally value one of three things, right? You value from AD carry, you value either like insane team fighting, you value like massive lane dominance, 2v2 lane dominance, or you value leadership and shot calling, right? So like there was one year, for instance, where I think that Faker was the best player in the world, but where Chovy has been the most skilled player in the world, right? And I think that there's a difference between skill and being the best, right? An example being like, for instance, the year Poby subbed in for Faker and T1 were garbage, and then he came back in. Like, to me, that year he was the best player, but he wasn't the most skilled player. He was like I don't think he was even top 5.
Yeah, weirdly, Gumayusi had the best macro of anyone on T1 in 23 summer when the rest of the team was really starting to fall apart.
I mean, so the thing is, for me, I don't think Gumayusi has ever been the best at any of those things. And I mean, I think the problem he's had in terms of judging him as a really top player is the years where he has been lane dominant, because he's AD carry, it's often been because of Keria having weird stuff. You know, like when they're playing the double range bot lane, we're not thinking, oh, Guma had like a really insane Jhin or a really insane Varus or something. We're thinking Keria played Varus support or like Caitlyn support or something like this, right? And to me, that's the problem I think with Gumayusi, because it's impossible to assess this guy out of the context of T1. But the problem is, when he's on T1, he has played his entire time in T1 with Zeus, who's like the best top laner in the world, Faker and Keria, and okay, the one year he didn't play with Zeus, they didn't really like. He was kind of like he was there to enable Keria, right? So I don't think you could like. I think the problem with Gumayusi, and I think it's even on Hanwha Life, is this too, right? Like, I don't think he is the most skilled player in the world, but he has a very specific role that he has to play on the team, and he's capable. He's a very good role player, right? And I think that's how I would judge Gumayusi. I'm not saying this guy's not skilled. You know, I'm not saying like he's not a top 20 AD carry in the world. You know, I'm not saying like he's some garbage player, right? But I think when you look at a player like Gumayusi, you have to judge him within the context of what teams require from him, and you can never think of him as like the best, because he's never, you know, even when T1 have played for him, it's because they're forced to by the meta. I don't feel like it's because T1 really, really trusted him to the end of the world, you know?
So, like, that's the thing is, like, I think we're underselling him here, because, like, you're not wrong in the fact that he's often played to a structure, but that structure's changed a lot over time. You know, you look at 2023 Worlds, as you were saying, after Swiss, after they lost to Genji in the Swiss, they say, this is not working. We can't play for these scaling Sivir, Zeri bot lanes. I can't remember what else they were playing at that point. And they said, no, we're playing double range bot. This will flip the meta. Now, obviously, Carrier is praised for that, but Gumo is incredibly good on stuff like the Varus too. He is the best Varus player of the modern era. This guy is absolutely insane at that, and that's one of the reasons they could play that. Stuff like the Kalista Renata too, incredibly potent at that. But then you go around into 2024, it actually became the opposite. If you look at World Finals 24, it's actually just like, we're picking you Caitlyn just so you can push early and then unlock Carrier. Completely different role. And I think that, like, those things are still very, very valuable. And this is where I think I have to come around to the very, very big positives of Gumayusi, which I think there's something that, particularly you look at Worlds 23 and Worlds 24, this comes into it. The one thing you can never deny Gumayusi is he is the best AD carry of all time at playing up to the World's occasion. No one else even comes close.
Probably even specifically
to
playoffs, right? He's unreal, yeah.
Exactly. Because, I mean, like, let's think about, because we have to compare him against the other big AD carries in the world. The only other one I can think of is Viper. I think Viper, you look at, like, Worlds 21, most that's fantastic. I think last year, Viper was insane despite only making Worlds quarterfinals. But I actually think, like, Ruler has had a couple of stinky stinker
He
worlds.
definitely has.
He's had some awful worlds. And like Deft, though he
had
was
a few
great in
bad ones.
2022, he had a couple of bad ones too. Gumayusi has like never had a bad worlds ever. Do you know how insane that is to say?
Sure.
Like that is insanity to say. And now I'm sad that we don't see that in domestic or at MSI, where I
Yes.
think that, one of the problems is, they went in as favorites to MSI 22 and, they lost in the 5-game series versus RNG. And I think bot lane was not great at that. I think at Worlds 22 as well, things didn't go, I mean, that was mainly through top lane, but a couple of times, like, he went in as favorites and didn't win. But at Worlds, that has very rarely been a thing. And I think there has to be something said about, no one in the AD carry role has ever come close to unlocking their full potential as Gumayusi does at Worlds. And that is something which I don't think you can ever deny.
I'll give you an example. Specifically, if you remember the 2024 run, that was another one of those ones where no one thought they were actually going to win the title. That was the one where Gen G was better domestically. You even still had, like, good teams. Like, here's the part of his run that people forget. People probably remember the final was epic, which talked about in the last question. Yeah. But in the quarters, they played TS. That was the series he didn't die once. Then in the semis, they played Gen G. The fucking Gen G, the one that was beating him all the time. He died 4 times in 4 games total. Like, the idea, by the way, if you told me, I've obviously been a critic of Reckless for so long time, if you told me they lost the game and he didn't die, that doesn't tell me anything. If you're winning these games at Worlds on a team that, by the way, has to team fight at some point in time, and you never die, that goes to what Nymaera is saying. You've just got like a special quality under pressure at Worlds, bizarrely.
Sure, but okay, so I'll turn this slightly around though, which is that he doesn't need to be the one that is playing to his limits to put himself in position where he can die multiple times, because he has Faker, Owner, and Zeus, doing all of that, right? Yeah, so he gets to go and play cleanup. Like that's why this year I think is very interesting, because you would expect HLE to be at Worlds this year, right?
Yeah.
And now we will get to see him outside of his context, because to me this is a player who has systems player. I don't think. I love systems players. As a coach,
sure.
That's the compliment. That's like the best compliment. I would rather have as a coach somebody who is 8 out of 10 at playing weak side, 8 out of 10 at playing hyper carry, 8 out of 10 lane dominance. Then I can put my specialists around this guy. Like I love that kind of player, right? But if we're talking about him, put him in context of the where does he rank into the best AD carries of all time discussion, right? I find it hard to rate a systems player highly in that debate.
Put it this way, I'm with you, Peter, and here's why. Because people will know famously, I don't consider him like even close. I don't even have him in the conversation. He only gets to be in the conversation for GOAT ADC, because if you have the resume, you have to at least start with them, like, could he have been? And then I say no and move on to the rest of the names. And in fact, the joke is, when it's people like Vipe, we only won 1 Worlds, but I don't care. If I look at the body of work, every split, I can make a case Viper's the best ever. I know what you mean in this sense, Peter. Even in light of giving the credit like I just did in the Worlds playoffs, the problem is, I agree. The reason why this year will be so edifying to see him play, hopefully at Worlds with Hanwha Life, is because except for having Zeus, he won't have. It's like you said earlier, bro. He didn't just have one player that was like a special player. Think about it. He simultaneously had 3, and the reason why I'm going to say he had 3 is because last year's Worlds wasn't the same T1. Remember, up until Worlds, first of all, there's a reason he was benched at the beginning of the season, because when you had Thorin, suddenly you realise the value Zeus had for Gumayusi, which is because Zeus is probably one of the best top players at both styles of top lane. It meant that, like, when he had a carry pick, Gumayusi could just play this, like, weak side ADC, and it meant that, like, the occasions when Gumayusi got his pick, you could also just weak side top lane. When you had Thorin, it was a very different game, and you saw they were a much sketchier team most of the year, and they pulled it out of their arses at that Worlds. So you go to the years where they had Zeus, Faker, and Keria. Bro, you could not get, if you have Gumayusi, more perfect teammates than that. We just said earlier, he not only had a career, like a meta-defining support. By the way, the same support could even play ADCs, for fuck's sake. You could have a double ADC bot lane. A lot of people tried that elsewhere, and I'm pretty sure their coaches kept telling them, you aren't carrier, stop doing that. Like, we're just playing normal shit. Then you had, like I say, the amazing top lane. It's almost like crafted to let you get through the hard times when you can't play the Zeri and can't play certain metas. And then your mid laner, listen, you can critique a lot about Faker, but you've got, like, probably the best shot calling mid laner, maybe best shot caller ever in League. All with, like, essentially, these are all players who can offset so many of your weaknesses that when it comes together, you can win everything. Yeah, I know. The problem, I know what you mean, is this, Peter, is if I took Gumayusi and I give him the career of Ruler and Viper, where they've been around a bunch of teams, I imagine he would have the worst set of results spots for that. Whereas the difference is, I don't know that some of them would be that great in Gumayusi's spot, but you put some of them in the best team for them, and they could also maybe have as many worlds or something. You know, I don't think that's a hater comment.
Yeah. But I mean, I think the interesting thing is how much worse Carrier looks this year playing with Pace versus how he looked playing with Guma.
Okay.
I mean, I think the guy's Carrier's obviously like one, I think he's probably the best.
Still is the best support in the world.
No, he's the best support in the world, right? But having Pace as the AD carry limits his ability to dominate games as hard as he's been able to. Okay, Faker's obviously not being the best this year. Like to me, the interesting thing that I will be looking at going into internationals this year is how much better or worse Carrier looks now that he's got a new AD carry. And because I've said all these negative things about Gumayusi, but the same applies to Carrier. No, he's been in the same situation as well. And obviously, like the eye test tells me, Carrier is like the best support of all time, right? The eye test tells me that Faker is the best player, not most skilled player, but best player of all time. Zeus is probably one of the best top laners of all time, and that makes me rate Gumayusi worse.
Yeah.
By comparison, because I don't think like the best player, just because a team wins world.
You said earlier, I'll tell you another angle that I think is quite interesting is if I take most of the players that were either in, specifically I think extreme roles like top lane and ADC, if I take the best players at these roles, the candidates that we have for the GOATs, usually if anything, they are all limit testers, aren't they? It's like Shy, Bin, fucking Ruler, Viper. These guys play on the edge, and if anything, their team, the meta, and they're like what's being shot called, reins them in a bit. One thing I'll give props to Gumayusi for, but I think it also suggests even he knew he wasn't the GOAT, is I actually think, as said earlier, he went from being a choker early, who was on some like crown shot, like if I just die at the wrong moment in the team fight, flashing, I've lost the fight, to he actually became a very responsible player at those worlds. Like he wouldn't go beyond the limits of what he could do, and he wouldn't in a fight where he didn't have the champion just go right in and get his head. Which, listen, one thing I've always loved about a Viper is his whole shit's like, listen, just get on my back points, and if I can stay alive in this fight, we win. Jackal was probably the most extreme example ever, right? That's a guy who's either going to carry the whole team fight or get 0 to 100 instantly. I would say the problem is, even though I think actually what's made this segment quite reasonable is, even when we're critiquing Gumayusi, like essentially I've just said there that I think even he knew he wasn't the best. So I respect him as a player, it just doesn't mean he was the best player at ADC, I think if he'd have really been able to push the boundaries like some of these guys, probably would have.
Yeah, I mean, like, and then I suppose there's some other stuff about, there's actually a comparison to be drawn weirdly between Gumayusi and Knight in regards to how bad the bogey champions have affected their career as well. Because obviously the Knight Azir conversation is one which has been had a lot. And obviously it's a conversation that's been happened a lot with Guma. Maybe not in terms of like him being completely ass at the champions, of course, right? You still find at them, but he was always someone that was kind of like questioned on Ezreal, Kai'Sa, and Zeri. And those three have been, over all of his career, some of the most powerful champions.
Well, those in their era, those are the... Remember, right, let's go in order, right? Zeri, the joke is... Everyone was getting pentakills that year on Zeri. He couldn't even play it. By the way, the Kai'Sa one, my boy Gala made an entire half a career just off playing that one champion alone. And Ezreal, I'm pretty sure almost every single great other ADC has Ezreal as like, well, their top 3 picks, bro. They love that shit.
It used to be the champion which you proved yourself as an AD carry on. It was Korean Ezreal. So if you remember back in like 2015, 2016, you had like Bang, Deft, Prey as your Ezreals, and like that was like your mark of mastery as an AD carry. And like I know that Guma's put effort into, because obviously he played like Kai'Sa last Worlds, and he had actually a pretty good game on it versus Anyone's Legend, was it in the quarterfinals, or was it versus Top Esports or versus Anyone's Legend? It was either the quarters or the semis, and he actually had a very good game on it. And that was fine. But like you look over the weight of games across his career, I mean, it's still not fantastic. And that has to, weigh into actually some of the constraints you played around him. And while I think you can play around those constraints in much in the way that Knight has done with Azir as well, that puts into it too. But that changes the structures you have to put around him. And there's something to be said about, discovering where your structures aren't working for you and finding a way around it. I mean, so as Peter was saying, like he's definitely played towards the structures, and that is great for a coach with that. But also what you can play informs what structures you end up playing towards as well. There is a reason why they haven't played besides 2022, nearly as many hyper carries. They played like some snowball bot lanes in the Kalista Renata and the Varus double AD carries as well. And they played some like solid 1v1 AD carry, allow carrier to roam away from him stuff too. But realistically, they haven't played nearly as centric as like your ruler lanes on JDG or on Gen.G or, Viper on HLE as well. Wasn't really where he found his success. And of course, that has affected his career too. Like, these bogey champions are pretty significant for the AD carry pool, which is a point against him, which is why you can see how this gets so complicated. Because, like, clearly, this guy has an insane level of clutch. He clearly has a level where at Worlds, he can unlock a level beyond so many other AD carries. But there's so many other constraints in there too, which means for me, I can't say he's the greatest AD carry ever, because we haven't had the conclusive evidence away from all of these caveats which we've said. But he definitely has the capability to be there, because he showed his upper level at different points.
I'll even give you, as you said, one of them, but two of the champions he's actually very good at, Varus and Senna. They're not even the champions he tends to play if you're the stud ADC. Like, that's the shit the coach makes. He wants to go on those champions because he's had such an idiosyncratic strength in the game.
But yeah, I agree. But I think that also, like, so I think probably the best Varus ever.
I think so,
I think that's at this point I would say so. Although there's like a contest from like Ruler 2017.
Up there, certainly.
Okay,
but I would probably say Guma now.
Okay, let's go safe then. Okay, so one of the top 3 Varuses ever, one of the top 3 Jins ever, one of the top 3 Sennas ever.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yep.
One of the,
and I'll give him just to be fair, since I agree he generally didn't play the super OP. The one super OP thing that he was good at was Jinx, though. I'll give him that. If he could get the Jinx, he was definitely. I mean, look, people forget now that was once upon a time OP, but when it was, he was very good on that. I'll give him that. Okay, keep going, Peter.
Yep. Then Caitlyn, Ashe.
Easily amazing with Caitlyn, yes.
Yeah. Caitlyn, Ashe, but this is my reservation, right? Caitlyn, Ashe, Kalista, Lucian, right? Those champions he can play, but I don't think he's I don't think he's a top 3 ever on those champions. But the fact that
just because there are so many players across
the problem with that is Caitlyn's death. Sure, the greatest of all time. Yes, absolutely.
But the point I'm making here is he has champions which he is greatest of all time. Discussion in, right? He has champions that he, within the context of carrier, is also, I think that his Caitlyn, the way he plays Caitlyn, is a way that is not to dominate on Caitlyn. It's to unlock his support, right?
Right.
And if you want to watch a game to show this, watch 24 Worlds Finals, where basically he plays 1v1 Caitlyn, which is not how you typically think about it, but it allows carrier to roam.
But I think that's the difficulty, right? Like that's the interesting thing about Gumayusi, right? Because he has the champions that he's greatest of all time on. He has the champions that he could be the best Caitlyn 2v2 player, but they've never used him in that.
Yes.
They haven't properly used him in that role against other top teams. Against bottom feeder LCK teams, we don't care, right? Like that's not interesting, right? They don't use him to do that, right? And then he has the champions that he's not very good on, but he found ways to make them work in certain situations. Never really on Kai'Sa, except right at the end, right? But he's never had but that's the problem, right? Because there's 3 different discussions here. And how much of his Caitlyn play and how much of his Kalista play, being the way that they are because T1 have demanded that from him, because he has carrier, rather than because he was able to or not.
Let me pose a counterpoint to you. Here's the problem, though, Peter. Another thing which is actually an elephant in the room on this topic isn't just we haven't compared him A-B. It's that almost no one else gets to stay in the same core for this many years. And so I'm going to do what I always do, Peter. You've heard me say this before. I am going to assume that the coaches who worked with this guy aren't idiots who just came in the room like, hey, I'm going to ignore who you are and just tell you how to play the game. I imagine what they did, because in his case, he had them for years and years, is they know from 1 billion scrims in every meta what this guy can and can't do. And I would imagine that when they didn't, like the example you just gave, we'll never know what he would have been like as a 2v2 killer. I imagine they tried it in scrims, Peter. I imagine eventually they were like, it's better actually if you just unlock carrier and then he does all that amazing carrier shit that no one else can do. I imagine they probably did some of that, I imagine he had a few games where he tried to brute force a fucking whatever, a Zeri, and then they just went, this is a waste of time. Why don't we just pick this guy, the fucking Jinx or something? Exactly.
I agree. I think the most interesting thing will be how is Carrier going to perform at Worlds? Assuming they go to Worlds, as you would assume you want to go to Worlds, but they're 4th in LCK right now, But if Carrier, back to this.
No, I know. By the way, I also now know what it's like to be a Gumayusi fan because everyone his whole career critiques every detail of him. And I know what you mean, Nymaera. Even though I let him do it because I was like, whatever, give him his time. When he started saying that shit about Kerry now, I was thinking of that Pike game. I was like, I will not stand for this slander.
Yeah.
This guy's fucking cracked. What's he talking about?
Yeah, Carrier is still like best support in the world.
I know.
I mean, Carrier may be like top 3 player of all time, right?
So obviously we've talked about a lot of context now. The way that if I was going to boil it, Gumayusi's career down into like this question down into a sentence is that like he is not definitively greatest of all time. He in fact can't be, but he has shown the potential to be in the right ways. He is simultaneously the most overrated and underrated player, I think, on that tier 1 roster. Because I think people overrate him because he's won so many world titles. I think they underrate him because actually a lot of the work he's been doing outside of them and the way that he provides to the team is very different from what people think about it. Because people respect the big game plays. And in fact, he's very, very clutch. But like, this is a great question because it's so hard to use our regular analogs of like clearly the best in this year, clearly the best person on this team, clearly the best player without having good teammates around him. All of our regular analogs we used to kind of like persuade a fairly casual person about how good someone is. They don't really stick here. So realistically, we have to respond with like return to this in like a year or two.
Yeah, here's also what makes it difficult is just then if you compare not just in isolation, but the context that we played with. So here's the problem. If you pick any of the other people who are his contenders for GOAT ADC, most of the time they were just the dude on their team. Every fucking ruler, again, Deft, Uzi, who else? Viper, most of the time they're like 1A or 1B option, right? In his own team, this is why you're right that he's the most overrated and underrated Nymaera. In his own team, people would tell me you have the GOAT of all GOATs in mid lane. Some people think you have the GOAT support, and then you have the GOAT top laner as well. Bro, he's like the 4th best GOAT by their own logic on his own team. And also that then begs the obvious question, which is, can you actually be the GOAT if 4 players on your team are the GOAT? Like, what are we doing at this point in time? How much credit is there to go around, you know?
I think that's fair.
Yeah, and again, like that's why it's a good question, why we can make an extended topic out of this. Because
and that's like you say, it's not over as well, bro. That's the best part. If his career was over, these would be mysteries forever. Surely this year could actually make it amazing in 1 year for the, like you said, the Carrier and the Gumayusi angle really dope.
That's why, you know, like Zeus winning LCK Cup and then winning first stand last year, that's a big note in his favor because he did that away from his team. You know, I think that playing on a team with like owner, like because most of modern League of Legends is jungle support mid, right? And having that combo stay together, like, and this is.
Oh, I'll give you a spicy angle, Nymaera. Look, he'd never say this because no one would ever be rude to Faker of all people. But I'll tell you how you could do like an answer where you don't say the person's name, but you just set the internet on fire. Imagine HLE win Worlds, because by the way, right now you can argue they're the best team in LCK. If they won Worlds, here's what you do if you Gumayusi in the interview. You just say something like, well, it was actually a really new experience to play with a mid laner that can always win mid lane. Like, oh, can you even imagine if you said that out loud? But look, but it would be true though. Like, they've gone to a lot of worlds, by the way. We didn't mention this deal. A lot of the worlds they've gone into, everyone comes in with Faker as like their 5th best mid and shit. Like, holy fuck, he's considered a massive, you know, gap in the mid lane, and he sometimes.
Yeah, and I think, like, you know, we've seen the value that Faker brings to his team or what happens when he's there, because the whole ship just falls apart without it. But his value isn't through just brute force winning stuff in the way, like, and every team kind of needs, like, a brute force, like, force of nature player that just, like, destroys their lane or is just so good at team fighting. Faker's not that anymore, right? But I think the way that you structure which is actually so crazy as to how T1 won last World.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because, like, 2025 is just I don't think we'll ever see a World like that again. That was such a weird World Championship. But I mean, obviously, like the trio of Faker, Owner, Carrier being together, it kind of, that is your DNA of that team now. You can kind of switch in anyone else in and out, which is why now, like you were saying, you know, the structures that were there, he doesn't have them anymore. If you can do something like incredibly, you know, potent on HLE, that adds as a incredibly important data point to his career.
By the way, I also hope people can now see, because last episode, some of that was super specific to things that were happening that week or with the big topics. This is also the whole premise we actually had for this show was that, a bit like the first question, it can go on any angle. It can be things specific to the game. It can be esports narratives. It can be like historical elements. We can tie things, because obviously we've got like a lot of shared knowledge of the game. So I actually think also this last topic is also an interesting one. This is Peter's. So Peter, what is your topic?
Okay, so my topic, and this is to open up the floor to you guys, because obviously, you know, I'm a bit of a fundamentalist on this topic, which is when is it time to give up on your rookie project? and scrap it.
Ooh,
And the
okay.
reason why this came into my mind, okay, is because obviously Heretics and Fnatic have given up, they've replaced Emperos on Fnatic, and they basically are in the process of scrapping everything in Heretics, for some ends. Okay, so this is after 6 months. The contrast to this, and the reason why I think this is an interesting topic, is in the same league, you have Vitality, top of the league right now, with Linkus in jungle, probably playing the best out of any jungler in the league, having had 1.5 years where he was not very good. And I say this as like the biggest Linkus,
Yeah,
like
course.
even I was beginning to lose hope towards the end of last year, But put him with Humanoid, everything works again, And this is a player, so within the context of Vitality, this is a player who they basically Pad and Mac basically have staked their entire career on, to the point where they must be feeling pretty good now. But the amount of shit they've gotten
Oh, of
for
course.
everything around Linkers has been really, really, really.
Especially
Sure.
because he replaced Douglas too.
Yeah, exactly. The
Yeah,
joke is,
he's
even though
replaced-
Douglas himself hasn't had some amazing career, a lot of people also hated on him because they were like, wait, you kicked the Douglas guy immediately, but then this guy gets like 2 years. I know that was actually extra pressure for sure.
Yeah, and I mean, to be clear, he did not play well. I've always said I thought that the three players I thought would change European League of Legends, Kalist, Alvaro, Linkus, right? The other two have won multiple titles between them without caps. They've won titles without caps. But Linkus hasn't won that title and hasn't looked even in the same league as these other guys, right? So Vitality gave him the chance. Now, my approach from this here is, as a coach, you live and die by your project, right? Like, if you've done your proper due diligence on a player, you should give them a year, right? And why do you give them a year? You give them like half a year where you try one way to coach them, you try a second way to coach them, then you have a meeting after 6 months and you set clear expectations. You need to do this by the end of the year, or else you're kicked, right? And that's why I think you should give a year, right? Because I think that if you're going to try to coach a player in a certain way, you should give them, you should try multiple ways, because I think players respond to different types of coaching really, really well. So I don't think you should ever scrap a rookie project after 6 months. I'm going to just leave that hanging there. I don't think you should ever kick a rookie after 6 months. Not going to say any more about that.
Okay.
But not all people agree on that. But to me, when it's clear that the Fnatic and Heretics projects were going in such a terrible direction that a change was felt was needed to be made, right? And for me, I was like, my thought is you should have just scouted better, right? But I'm interested to hear, and once you've made the bad scouting, you should see it through all the way, right? But I'm interested to hear other thoughts on this.
Do you want the the gameplay thoughts, or the one which I think actually matters?
I want your thoughts as an analyst who's watched League of Legends for like a decade,
Okay.
right?
Okay. All right. So I tell you what actually matters is you stop your project when it financially doesn't make sense. That's the actual answer. The answer is because in League of Legends, I mean, Monty's talked about this a lot recently on Twitter and on various shows as well. There isn't that much incentive to win in League of Legends right now. Prize pools are kind of gone, and the effort to compete with the G2 or whoever else in your region is really, really high. So the real answer to this question is, actually, financially, does it make sense for me to continue this or not? Depends on your contract length, with the price of your contract as well. Are player values going up or down? Like right now, I mean, I suppose it's easier to change because I think player contracts are going down. So actually, a lot of the answer comes into, basically, am I tanking my project by continuing this? But say, like, we're going 10th every split. I mean, obviously, someone like SK tried something very, very different and said, well, okay, clearly what we had beforehand wasn't working. We want to try something more content team-wise. It depends on what kind of team you're in, right? Because a team like from well back in the day, Cloud9, back in like 2014, 2015, 2016, would bring up new players fairly regularly from their academy system and work through that point. Very, very different era, but they would get basically very cost-effective players, trained up very well, and they would use them very effectively. And then if they had a better, then they'd sell them on for a good contract and make a. That was actually one of the ways that they made decent profit back then, which is crazy. Back at that point in time, most teams don't even have an academy now, which really changes the equation, because you can't just work in-house with an understudy where, I mean, like XL was one of the last teams to have that, right? And they had M&S and Nuke Duck, right? And then the M&S stuff happen in whatever way it happened. But most teams don't even have an academy now to have that as a way to kind of soft launch these kind of changes and then work to kind of bring people up and bring people down. I think that's really changed things, because now we are at the point where actually probably having a shorter term contract, which is a bit cheaper, which actually maybe can bail out a little bit earlier and not feel the financial strain, as opposed to like, oh god, I'm like 2022 Vitality super team which fell apart and they had to change people mid-year. Like, that was awful. That's worst case scenario. You can't do that. I mean, Fnatic did, similar, right? When they had like, Razork and Humanoid, and they realized, okay, well, this is clearly a problem after a year or two, but they kept with it. Realistically, in the modern day of League of Legends, this is actually a financial question rather than a competitive one, unless you're a team with a fuck ton of money.
I'll give you that. Go on.
But just to follow a question then, like, is our Fnatic, like, I cannot believe that Emperos is on more than like minimum salary, right? Like, should Fnatic be kicking Emperos, even though he's clearly played? He's not played well, right? Like, Emperos is the worst top in the league, right?
Isn't that
Should
like a bit of
Fnatic
a
be
specific
kicking
one, though? Because first of all, it's implied he's just Vladdy's mate. That's why they got him. And then secondly, if you notice, they put that roster together like in the 11th hour when they missed every other good top player. Like, if anything, the ultimate indictment of Fnatic is that they let fucking Heretics and Na'Vi have the top lanes. It's one thing if KC or someone gets some, or Vitality had Nakako in their academy. You let everyone get a top player at the end when there was no seats left at musical chairs. You went, I'll have this broken chair biscuit that was never even a chair. Like, so that one feels like too specific, Peter. This does lead into my topic, though. So first of all, obviously, no one would do it the way you did it. You were a lunatic. You that was the only context in which you were fun and a mentalist, because you were the fundamentalist. Whatever. Listen, that's my style. That's how I used to do it. Whatever. But yeah, your problem is because you're also a coach who cares about the personal side of the player. So here's the difference, Peter. When you say that idea of like, I'll never kick a rookie after like, one split or something. Yeah, but in that scenario, Peter, there's coaches who are fired if they don't have two good splits. You know what I mean? So so my question would be, how bad is it though? Because it's one thing, if you're making it sound like you can just be absolute ass in two splits, mate. There's a lot of people who are like, I want to do this for 10 years. I can't get fired after a year because I like gambled the whole team on. I'll give you an example. Funnily enough, I do think the role that's the hardest for us is jungle. Mate, if you come into the league and you are not good as a jungler early on, you'll not only look bad, everyone will blame you, and you will seemingly be the reason for a lot of losses in the game, because all the laners are going to go, don't judge me, I didn't have this gank, don't judge me, we were behind on jungler, we weren't the first to the objective. There's a million ways you can blame the jungler. So my problem with this is, I think what you said earlier about like the idea of like, do you do it for financial reasons? Here's a key piece of context for me if I'm signing a rookie, is, did I sign him himself because someone else fucked up and I'm bringing him in? That's what I'm with people like Douglas, right? They got to come into the lineup sort of like, oh, maybe this guy could be good. We were having issues anyway with who we had. It's different. I'm with you if it's that we signed the player like they did with Jojo and Danny. Like, no, I think this is the player. Even though he's a rookie, I'm picking this guy to be the one I think is the best choice for me at this role. If you do that, I think in that scenario, if you keep kicking him, eventually you should just be fired, mate, because your decision making it's fucking terrible. Like, again, it's not like you brought that guy. I'll give him a chance, in half a split because this other guy fucked up or had a visa issue or health. If that's a scenario, then you know what? That wasn't your first choice anyway. If it's your first choice, I'm with you. You should sort of actually like believe in yourself enough to know maybe one split wasn't enough. Maybe the second split is where this thing I saw before kicks into gear and works. I'll give you some other context within your team that I think allows you to keep a player longer or a project longer, which is if you have a player who is flawed, I think you did this in some of your teams, but you have, for example, a specific veteran or strong player elsewhere in the game that can like offset their weakness. That's another way you can keep that guy for now and see if the part you think will develop. And then also another detail for me is this. It depends what scale of team we're talking about, but I also think you shouldn't judge, by the way, positively or negatively, I don't think after like one split you should judge players too much based on things like only the regular season, only a playoff failure, because these are things that can change. Like, there's players who never make it internationally, there's players who are awesome that are conceded. By the way, there's players like the aforementioned Gumayusi. The joke is, you could almost argue he was primarily only good in Worlds playoffs. Like, what? No one else would even be allowed to get to find that out, because if you'd already not being the best domestically and then you weren't that good in a normal, like you'd never get to a Worlds final, would you? So we'd never get to actually. And also the reason why Gumayusi is the ultimate example is they kept that guy quite a few years before he kicked into his absolute peak level, etc. So I think a lot of these questions, obviously it's more like, what are our own little protocols, what are our own little rules that observation has told us?
Like, for instance, I mean, there have been plenty of teams that have actually been okay with the project which they went towards, and then just a player became available, which just messed things up. And so they were just like, well, we got to pick this person up. So, for instance, I think there were a couple of players saying, like, I think it was Weibo 24. It's a bit of a deep cut, but Weibo 24 Summer, they had, I think that was Xiaohao ZDZ. And, like, they were actually not bad at that point. And then just, like, Tarzan became available. Well, you pick up Tarzan. Like, there are some there are because this is the thing. Like, there is no one answer to this because it really does depend on how much money you've got, what role you're switching out, who becomes available. Like, if Caps became available, you drop everything you have and you get Caps in Europe. And the same would go for a bunch of other players. So, but I, in the spirit of your question, you're asking basically, like, at what point does a failure in a rookie team lead to a change? I suppose that's the spirit of the question.
I mean, that's my question. But because the reason, the context for this is, I just was thinking about this within the context of Europe, right? Because you have the examples of Heretics and Fnatic basically scrapping their project now, right? After half a year. At the same time as you see Linkus, basically in his sixth chance, right? Sixth split, finally hitting his potential. You see Paris, like, also within a different environment, right? So the problem, the thought that I have is how. So I'm not talking about bringing in, like, Caps becomes available, right?
By the way, you could also technically argue, Peter, that Linkus is also the reason why he has a different head coach now.
I mean,
So all I'm saying is you might have to take a few slings and arrows, mate, if you keep some of these players around,
Well, I mean, Hylissang was also in the equation there too at some point, right? So that was probably the bigger issue in that one. Because Vitality is such an interesting one to look at in context of this, right? Because to the layman's eye, so many decisions looked like they were very overdue. Like, it felt like they wasted, like, several splits of Hylissang just being really bad, and we were hoping that Hylissang would, like, come back and be, prime Hylissang. That realistically didn't happen, and I'm sorry I'm sad for that, because prime Hylissang is incredible. He's one of the greatest supports to ever play the game, especially within Europe. I mean, he was recognized even internationally. And yeah, Linsus is a play. I cast him before he went into LEC because I cast him in NLC, and I thought he was fantastic there. He was great. I thought he was really good. So I was hoping that he'd turn up as well, but the reality is not everyone does that from tier 2 to tier 1. So, someone like Zoelis as well, the support. Really not great, but then he was on Rogue. So can you really judge him for his debut there? I mean, there are a bunch of players like that. God, I mean, sometimes the harder ones are people who have a good debut split and then they don't live up to that. So someone like Jackie's. Jackie's was really good until, like, one of his debut splits, and then kind of had, like, a really off year. He's only got back to that similar level of form now, and that, maybe you could say actually they've stuck to their guns and they've been rewarded for it. But, for a solid year, I was there like, okay, he should probably be traded out now. A lot of the things that you make, a lot of the information you would make that kind of decision on, you would only know from working within a team environment. So that stuff about, well, do they respond well to coaching? Do they buy into your vision of the game? Do you think that their personality is cut out for pro? Because some people their personality is not cut out for pro. They're arseholes, they don't listen, they want to be the main character, they're not good at being coached. Now, most of the time when you make it to tier 1, you've rattled out a lot of that anyway, because tier 2 is still okay for that, but not all the time.
That even leads into another thing I was thinking, which is, again, because I'm trying to take from the perspective of I'm not actually necessarily their coach. Maybe I'm also just a player in the team or watching it. Right? Another thing that I also consider is, because again, I don't assume most coaches are idiots. A lot of them are very knowledgeable about the game and team structure and dynamics. Another one is, and I found this with it, like, I'll give you an example. I never thought, unlike Peter, that Corby was fucking the best thing than sliced bread. I thought he was like, fucking 7 out of 10 ADC in a region where you had some that were 9 out of 10 ADC. But here's the difference. When I hear people talk about him, an intangible he had was, it seems like he was never a problem ego in any team he was ever in. And he was a very accommodating player, and he knew his own limits, etc. So there are also certain intangibles that might not be like skills in the game, but that can add to why you might get to stay around in a team environment or play in a specific type of a team. I do think that's important. Similarly, by the way, I'll give you another one. Even though people love to ignore this all the time, I always tell people, actually one of the biggest gifts Remain from G2 gave the world by putting those scrim results puts out is you will often find, people don't do this, but I do because I love history like this. If you ever go back to a team that was hyped before the split or in the first few weeks, you'll often find they were beating G2's ass in scrims. Like, do you know that infamous now notorious statement by Giotto of like, I don't think G2's going to make it to Worlds? That's because GX was like one of the Scrim God team's boys. They were actually putting belt to ass before the split began. So he didn't say that like some moron, like, having cap sucks. He was saying it because it's like, actually, I've sort of got I think it's like the bead on that they're going to fail and we're better than them. Because also, I think that was the reason he said it. I think he thought we're going to take one of the spots. We're beating them. Also, remember, another team was the same year, that Fnatic team. That Fnatic team was tooling not only G2, I think, the whole time, but a bunch of the other squads. So again, similarly, by the way, if the player is failing and he's not doing well, but for example, in scrims, he seems to be actually like unbelievable, I might also give him a lot more time then, because I always say with players like that, yeah, you are gambling, but that's like, you might actually have a winning lottery ticket if you ever hit though, bro. Like, you don't just get like a good player. If he ever unlocks what he is in the scrim, maybe I go from like troubled player to like best in role. That's also worth giving someone a bit of extra leeway, I think.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. It's interesting because, if you'd asked me at the start of the split, should Vitality sign Yukino? If you told me Vitality signed Yukino, I wouldn't have been like that, I wouldn't have been that against it. But like Linkus is just like, he's just smurfing on he's even smurfing on Skumon, right? Like it's very impressive.
And by the way, if you want, I'll give you a couple of teams that did stick with players that again people probably would have pulled the trigger on split one. How about like MCOI when they brought in the Spanish players? I think some of those, mate.
Yeah,
when people like, I don't care that Peter loved him. When Merwin first came in the league, I was like, mate, this is like all the downsides of the show and none of the carries. What the fuck is he doing? Like this guy, lol, I play weird champions. Like, mate, you play top lane. That role before Fearless was like be good on 3 champions, not like look at this weird pocket pick I've got. That's not the right role for that, man. That's some jungle shit or something. And then the other one was actually when BDS first came along. BDS also kind of sucked, but when you give those players time, like put it this way, now I mean the joke is they want to recreate it now. Shio and Nuke actually became like a classic fucking duo. Like that synergy's probably one of the better ones we've had in LEC. But if you'd have kicked one that like Nuke himself would have gotten booted day one on fucking Schalke or whatever it was, like there's some of these pickups that people would have kicked way earlier. Like I would have kicked him then, but I tell you what, he's actually an above average mid laner for like 4 years now or something. It's pretty good.
The only other consideration which I've got on my mind right now, because we've rattled off through a lot of good stuff, is sometimes you have to give a bit of allowance for meta as well.
Yes, that's also fair.
If a jungler comes up, and they're not a tank jungler, they're an AD skirmish. Like right now, if you're an AD skirmish jungler, you're great, fantastic, wonderful. Yeah. If you then have to go onto Sejuani Maokai duty, it's a very different game. What happens if it goes around to like 2020 to 2021? Well, I mean, really things changed away around about, I don't know, 2018, 2019, away from a lot more utility vision junglers. They went around to like your assassins, your carries, your fighters. That carried on up until about, well, Canyon's era, really, and that came into like 2020 to 2022-ish, I suppose, when we had 2021 to 22, we had stuff like the Morgana, Hecarim, Udyr, very, very different again. And now for the last year, I mean, Fearless has not saved us from Jarvan, Shinzao, Pantheon, Vi Nocturne just on cooldown. Like, we've had that every single game of every draft for the entire year so far. If you're not one of those players right now who plays those champions, you're obviously not going to look good. And suddenly, things will change eventually. They will do, because it's just the nature of League. I mean, eventually these champions will come and they'll go. You have to question things again. We've talked about people having bogey champions. We've talked about, Knights Azir or Gumayusi on, Zeri, Kai'Sa, Ezreal, where, you might not be bad on them. You can't show your best side on them. Sometimes you got give a bit of allowance for that too. Mid lane especially, because it's such a varied role. You're not always going to get Sylas Akali. I mean, we've been kind of locked in Orianna Azir meta since, 23 odd. But that won't last for forever too. We've only just seen Syndra come back. That changes things too. So that's like the one other consideration I'd give. And like, for instance, if you were a rookie player in 2024 and you were a top laner, God help you with lane swap meta. God help you with that. Learning to be a lane swap player in 2024, that sucks. Like playing against some of these great older veterans, like, I mean, Odawanme when he was still around, or someone like Broken Blade, you're playing against them on a wider map when they've played this stuff in years in the past and you've never had to experience this on stage before. You can't succeed in that, like to the level you were expected to when you were signed, which is also why, when people are building rosters and you hear, oh, Fearless is through, you can't play like you. I mean, so weirdly, the point about Fearless and you talk about one tricks, China views that very differently. unfortunately, because they think that if you're a one-trick and fillers, you always get to have one game of your one-trick, even if it's out of meta. But if you're reliant on a certain set of champions, like a Jax or an Aatrox or whatever, then obviously you can't play that multiple games in a series, and that really hurts you. And yeah, that's something which you have to give an allowance to as well. So if you're trying to end like a rookie project quite soon, sometimes you have to just hold on and just hope that things come around to your better champions. You gain confidence on them. You learn how to play the game through those picks, and then you can broaden out that skill set afterwards. Sometimes you just get sideswiped by that too, which sucks. It's not a very satisfying thing where you just have to like tank a split because the meta doesn't go your way. But that is unfortunately part of Pro League of Legends. Sometimes you have to tank your bad metas.
Yeah, I mean, like the support meta right now is fucking tragic, right? Like for 4 years, you've just been able to survive just playing engage.
But people would have said that on Leon and Nautilus, and now it's Enchanters. You know, like it's the same thing.
Yeah.
It's just which side of the coin is flipped.
Yep, fair enough.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt your point. Basically, it's just that these things come in cycles, and I completely agree with what you're saying about the Enchanter meta. It's very, very different from what people were prepped for.
Yeah. No, I agree. No, I mean, I don't really have a good conclusion on this, but it's just been, it's interesting. I think that there is something that needs to be said for people, considering, because everyone says we are a long-term project, right? And this is 6 months into a split, into a year is when you can see who was really in, because if Hongq is your is your rookie, it's very, very easy to like have faith in Hongq, like be like, oh yeah, we always believed in rookies, It's like when you have your Empress, it's when you have your Paris, it's when you're like, I'm not saying these guys can never find success, right? I'm saying that they had a very, very rough start to their time in LEC. That's when I think you find out the most. And I think what Thorin is saying about how coaches, won't survive long term. If they hold out for their players is fair. But I think sometimes if you make the wrong decision in a moment like this, then I think that kind of dooms you as well.
No, you also think though as well, Peter, like another problem is what team are you on? Like the difference is if you are a Fnatic or a G2 and you hold on to that play and you gamble more than one split, like it's like sports, mate. Like not only will it get you fired, but the org can like somewhat be tanked. Like you have to get to, like for example, some of these teams literally do budget in with the sponsor. They'll be at Worlds. I mean, the most famous example ever is that Team Liquid Super Team in 2022, was it? The one where they quite literally had spent the most money and then couldn't even activate the sponsor because they couldn't go to Worlds. Like that's not a minor consideration. So I'm sorry, in that scenario, it wasn't working rookies, but if you'd have had a player there, it doesn't matter what you think. Like on that one, if you could go back in time, you'd probably kick him after one split and get someone else.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think that's part of the problem, right? Like you need to have. The problem is you can't be that's what makes me think that if you are a big org, you can't afford not to have an academy team.
Yes.
Or unless your scouting is literally flawless, right?
Yes.
But yeah.
Well, Fnatic used to have one. They used to have Fnatic Rising, and then it went to Fnatic Team Queso because they partnered up with the Spanish orgs. They kind of like did away with some of the burden by partnering up with an existing Spanish team, and then they dropped it. So Fnatic dropped it, and then recently, I mean, Sam Matthews was saying that they were looking to expand into an academy team again. Well, I think it's been pretty obvious that they've been useful for a while, but basically ever since, this happened in LCS too, ever since teams were not obligated to have an academy team, almost all of them have dropped. And I think that has led to a difficulty in the pipeline, because at that point, as you're saying, your scouting takes a hit, and it's very hard to tell some of the specifics about working with some of those players.
Yep. I think the interesting thing is that G2 have never, whenever G2 have been able to avoid having an academy team, they've avoided, it was G2 heretics at one point in the past, they just gave their brand and let the operations be sorted out by somebody else. But G2 have chosen to have an academy team. Now, are any of those players on G2 Nord going to get promoted to G2? Highly unlikely, right? But what are you using your academy team for? You're using it to scout academy, you're using it as additional scouting resource, and I think that also can be worth budget. But I mean that's a very, very different question, but I think it's just interesting that at a time when other orgs are cutting back, in EU you have orgs that use their academy teams, Heretics, KC, Vitality, you have orgs that really don't give a shit about academy. But now that KC in particular have found success promoting people through the academy, you found more pressure on other top orgs to also give a shit about Academy. I think that's just an interesting development. I don't know if it's going to be a positive long-term development at a time when ERLs are cutting back and things like this, but it's just interesting that G2 do have an Academy team now, right? And that, I think, I don't think you would have had that happen 2 years ago. You know, that's it.
Should we just wrap on that?
Yep.
Sounds
Yeah.
good to me.
Right, we'll edit this part in. Obviously, if you want to submit a topic for the next one, subscribe to the Last Free Nation Discord. There's a channel in there. You could put yours in, and we're going to pick at least one every week, and it will be mixed in with our takes.